Well, Alex, it's done. You're a Liverpool player. Can you describe how you're feeling?
The 2025 summer transfer window was easily one of the most lively windows in years. We saw big transfers, huge rejections, homecoming stories, and of course drama. Some clubs and fans left this window with high hopes and a huge smile on their faces, while some others left with heavy hearts and a huge frown. But which clubs fall in which category? Let's find out. These are the biggest winners and losers summer transfer window. Let's quickly get the most obvious one out of the way. Liverpool. You'll struggle to find many teams who were happier than Liverpool. It definitely didn't start well after Trent decided to leave the club after the expiration of his contract, but the club went and did some really good business. They signed Jeremy Frimpong, Milos Kerkez, Giovanni Leone, Hugo Ekitike, and of course, they broke the British transfer record for Florian Wirtz. But they didn't just spend, they also made some huge sales. They got 123 million euros from the sale of Luis Diaz and Darwin Nunez alone. They also made some good money from selling Jarell Quansah, Ben Doak, Quiver Kelleher, and Tyler Morton. Heck, they even eventually made 10 million euros from Trent's deposit. As they did, they were able to address the issues they had and improve squad depth. The main signings, Ekitike, Wirtz, Frimpong, and Kerkez, all hit the ground running with great performances or goal contributions in their first few games of the season. Now the club and the fans feel that they can actually go ahead to defend their Premier League title. That's what a good window does to your confidence. Another big winner this summer is Chelsea. They made two very early signings in João Pedro and Liam Delap, both of whom contributed in helping them win the FIFA Club World Cup. They also signed Jamie Gittens, Jorel Hato, and Estevao, all of whom have shown some promise in the early weeks. But what really made the window great for Chelsea was the departures. The Blues managed to dispose of a lot of their dead wood. I mean, these guys really got good money for Noni Madueke, Joao Felix, about 10 other players as well. What this meant was that they had a very low net spend this summer because most of their purchases were cancelled out by their sales. And to do this while addressing some major problems in the squad is certainly great. We'll talk about the first loser of the summer in a second, but if you aren't yet subscribed to the channel, go do that right now so that you don't miss out on our amazing content. Now, let's talk about Newcastle. Yeah, there were certainly big losers this summer. Even their fans admit it. Yes, they signed Anthony Elanga, Jacob Ramsey, Malik Thiaw, and Aaron Ramsdale, but they were rejected quite a lot, which is never great, especially not for a Champions League club. They wanted Ekitike, he ended up joining Liverpool. They wanted João Pedro and Delap, they ended up joining Chelsea. They wanted Šeško, Cunha, and Mbeumo, they ended up joining United. They wanted Trafford, he ended up moving back to City. And when it came to players who were willing to join them like Visser and Strand Larsen, their clubs were just bent on making life super difficult for the Magpies, which left the fans very frustrated. To crown it all, there was the whole thing with Alexander Isak. It was too drawn out and too messy, with the player and the club both coming out to release scalding statements on social media. It wasn't the best window for them at all. But on the other side of Tyne and Wear, Sunderland had one of the best windows of the summer, and considering they were just promoted to the Premier League for the first time in 8 years, that was super impressive. Yeah, they lost Joe Bellingham early in the window, but they were able to pull some household names somehow. These guys signed Granit Xhaka, Ronaldo, Simon Adingra, Nordi Mukiele, Arthur Masuaku, Mark Guehi, and a few other players addressing different issues in different positions. And considering this team was able to produce a 3-0 victory in their first game back in the Premier League, you can say that their recruitment has already started to yield returns. Anyway, up next is Barcelona, and they were easily one of the biggest losers this summer. We're sure the fans were happy that the club finally signed a goalkeeper in Joan Garcia, but everything else was a disaster. They were so close to signing Nico Williams. In fact, everything had been agreed, but the club could not guarantee his registration. So everything fell through and he ended up returning to Athletic and renewing his contract. They were also interested in Luis Diaz, but it just was not financially viable for them in the end. Marcus Rashford on loan was not a bad deal, but they had to wait until the very last moment to register him and Joan Garcia in order for them to be available for the first La Liga game of the season. And even then, it took them weeks to successfully register Szczesny, Gerard Martin, and new signing Rooney Bargi. It's been an absolute disaster, especially considering they also faced the same predicament last summer. Martinez suddenly left the club to move to Al Nassr. So, after a full summer transfer window, Barcelona hardly solved the issues with their squad and have to hope on their academy and the brilliance of the coach to save them. And it's interesting that we mentioned Al Nassr moments ago because they definitely were one of the biggest winners this summer. Even though they lost John Duran, they got Joao Felix, Kingsley Coman and Inigo Martinez from big European clubs, so that was definitely a good window. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough to help them win the Saudi Super Cup, but it's a good squad, so they could perhaps win the league this season. Let's now talk about another big loser. Brentford. Dango Utara, Jordan Henderson and Kelleher are definitely some good additions to the squad, but these guys saw their team get ripped apart this summer. They lost their coach, Thomas Frank, their goalkeeper, Mark Flecken, their starting defensive midfielder, Christian Norgard, and their highest goal scorer and best player, Brian Mbeumo. They also had Johan Visser beg, protest and rebel in order to be sold. There's no other way to put it. They had a horrible summer, and that has left many people making early predictions that they might be in the relegation fight this season. But of course, this video would definitely not be complete without mentioning Arsenal. They are definitely one of the biggest winners. They bought Victor Gyokeres, Martin Zubimendi and Noni Madueke, all of whom have hit the ground running. They also signed one of the best young centre-backs in Europe in Christian Mosquera, a good backup goalie in Kepa Arrizabalaga, and of course the big one, Eberechi Eze. This was the icing on the cake, because not only did they get one of the best 10s in the league, they snatched him from the grasp of Spurs, making it a victory for them. Speaking of Spurs, they were definitely one of the big losers in this window. The fans got their hopes up for Morgan Gibbs-White, Nico Paz, Savinho and Eberechi Eze, but they ended up getting none of those players. Yes, Mohamed Kudus and João Palhinha were great signings, but considering they lost Maddison to an ACL injury and Son just suddenly left the club, they no longer felt sufficient. Considering that they're now back in the Champions League, the fans expected to have a much better window than they did. Meanwhile, Man United, who aren't in the Champions League, or any European competition for that matter, were one of the biggest winners this summer. The fans certainly didn't expect the club to make so many big signings, but they did. They brought in top players like Benjamin Šeško, Mateus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo, and they still managed to get rid of a number of their unwanted players like Marcus Rashford, Rasmus Højlund, Alejandro Garnacho, Victor Lindelof, Jadon Sancho and Christian Eriksen, which have helped them save a lot of money on wages. All in all, it was a really good window for the Red Devils. It's now up to the coach to find a way to make everything tick. Finally, Man City were certainly big winners this summer. They got top players like Tijani Reinders, Ryan Ait-Nouri, Ryan Cherki and James Trafford, all at really great prices for their quality. Some money from the sale of players like James McAtee, Jan Couto and Maximo Perroni. On top of that, they still got rid of deadwood like Kyle Walker, Scott Carson and Jack Grealish. It was a really productive window for like Real Madrid, Juventus, PSG, Atletico Madrid and Inter Milan were neither big winners nor were they big losers. They just had pretty normal windows, hence why there was no mention. We now want to hear from you. Who do you think had the best summer transfer window and who would you say had the absolute worst one? Talk to us in this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also turn on the bell notification so that you never miss out on new content. We'll catch you in the next one.